Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/voicesinmyhead. That's audibletrial.com/voicesinmyhead. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. That's audibletrial.com/voicesinmyhead. Give it a try today. This is Rick Lee James, and the music you are hearing is from my new album, Thunder. The title track, Thunder, is a never-before-released song by the late Rich Mullins. There are also 12 other tracks made up of original music, hymns, and readings to guide the listener on a journey. You can buy Thunder today on clear vinyl and CD, or stream it on Spotify, Apple Music, and almost every other music streaming service. Thunder, hear it today at rickleejames.com. Welcome to Voices in My Head, the official podcast of me, Rick Lee James. I'm a recording artist, a singer, a songwriter, an author, a worship leader, and an ordained minister in the Church of the Nazarene. The Voices in My Head podcast is where I discuss music, movies, books, pop culture, theology, and more with friends, colleagues, and sometimes just by myself. Now make sure to let me know what you think of today's episode by leaving me a review on iTunes, or by tweeting at me at Rick Lee James on Twitter. And please join my mailing list at rickleejames.com, where you can receive an email every time a new episode is released. And by the way, in case you're interested in a daily dose of kindness and encouragement beyond this podcast, I also run the Twitter account at Mr. Rogers Say, where I post daily quotes from Fred Rogers, one of the voices in my head. Well, I guess that's it for the intro, so sit back, relax, and listen to the latest episode of Voices in My Head. Welcome back to Voices in My Head. As always, I am your host, Rick Lee James, and I am so glad that you are here with us again for what is going to be another great conversation. Today with my old friend Chris Hoisington of the band Brothers McClurg. Brothers McClurg has a new album, which by the time you're hearing this podcast has already released just a few days ago on September 20th, 2019. They are a wonderful band from Buffalo, New York on the Old Bear Records label, and we're going to talk some more about their new album Around the Mic 2, which I have listened to. I've listened all the way through a couple times now, and I really love it, and you're going to love it too.
Thanks, man.
So Chris Hoisington, welcome back to Voices in My Head.
Yeah, man. Glad to be back. It's like coming, like reunion. You know?
Yeah, I was just thinking the other day we're due for a phone call anyway, so this will end up being a good chance to catch up and hear what's going on in each other's lives.
Yeah, I love that. You know, so I'm been thinking about you and wondering what you've been up to. I know you've been pretty busy, I see, and you got a lot of irons in the fire, it looks like, which is good.
Very much so. Yeah, actually, this is my second podcast of the day. I had the other podcast that I do this morning, which is a Mr. Rogers tribute podcast called Welcome to the Neighborhood.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
And some exciting stuff coming out with that. And then I get to talk with you about some really great music today and just hear how it's going. Now, it's my understanding that you've just been shot, right?
I've been shot, man.
Just a few moments ago.
A couple times.
You were at the doctor's office and they shot you, or gave you a shot. Let's put it that way.
So. Right. Yeah. Yep.
So now you're driving, but you're driving safely, right? Right.
Well, now I'm sitting in a really beautiful spot, just kind of looking out and got to be in a spot that's inspiring to sit and park and just kind of catch up with you, But can't drive. That's too much. That's too much thinking.
I understand. Yeah. Well, it's a good day to sit out in a beautiful spot because we're having some great weather right now.
I know.
Well, the album, I want to get into that a little bit because it's a really great album to listen to, and we can do all kinds of other catching up throughout the course of the album. But I'm excited because on today's show, as we have these conversations and as we talk about songs, I'm going to be sampling for our listeners some of some of the songs so they can hear it while we're having the conversation, so that it'll be spliced in and out through the show. So this is going to be a special episode for people who love music and who love good conversations. And I want to start right out just talking about a song we were talking about a moment ago before we officially started recording. Around the Mic 2, it's a real stripped back album, much like Around the Mic 1, but these songs are unique and they have a real great Brothers McClurg feel. But there is one special cover song on the album that I think is going to be special to a lot of people, not just to your family, but it was written, from what I understand, by your grandfather, and it's called Going, Going, Gone.
The path we walk here on this earth is often steep and long, but Jesus walks beside us, and He's leading us toward home, and He knows the way that's best for me, and He says no, it won't be long until we've walked that final mile. We're going, gone.
Tell us a little bit about that one and why you chose to put it on this album.
Yeah, I think like before we made Around the Mic 1, I had been 2 years before even that record, I had started kind of delving into old records and old gospel records, and I think, artists like the Louvin brothers, they did a record called Satan Is Real. It was great, and just a lot of like the early black gospel and Southern gospel records, Truck Wagon Gang, and just a lot of that early primitive music, and being inspired by it. So started kind of writing in that vein, but also kind of dug through my parents, some of the records that they had made in the 70s. They made 4 or 5 vinyl records, and that song is on one of the records, and it was kind of one of those moments where we realized that, like, your parents did make some good songs, and we always, when you're younger, you kind of look at everything your parents do as kind of cheesy, but then you kind of get to a point where you can kind of embrace it for what it is and see the beauty in it. And that was one of the songs that kind of stuck with us. And so over the past probably 4 years, we've done that song live in various places, and we have people ask us if we're ever going to record it, and we never have. And then, the opportunity came in this Around the Mic 2, and kind of remembered it. We may have tracked it in Around the Mic 1. We would have, but we didn't. I don't think we remembered about it at the moment we were doing that. We kind of have a very loose approach to how we approach music and writing. And so usually, the writing process in the studio comes to come together very organically, where we're like, oh, well, I have this song, and I have this, the other guys chime in, I have this song, and kind of finish them and just kind of lay them down, and then see which ones stick in the process. So that was kind of one of those songs that came up and we remembered about when we were tracking this time. It's like, we should really do that song because people ask about it, and it's got a great story, and it ties into our family legacy and kind of the musical heritage that we came out of, that was very much playing small churches, rural churches, usually back roads churches that, maybe 200 to 300 people at the most, that, do backyard barbecues and Sunday afternoon tent revival type things. And that tends to be where our wheelhouse is musically, is kind of ministering to those types of churches that maybe still have one foot stuck in the way past of gospel music and hymns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it tends to be where we land. So that song in particular really kind of serves the niche that I think we serve, that we're going after. We're not, I know this is another comment, but I mean, we kind of gave up on writing massive worship songs a few records ago when I think we kind of found our home in this. And we're like, every time I play this kind of music, it just puts a smile on my face because I just feel like the weight of the past and the weight of my family, and it feels very authentic to us.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like we have to try very hard to be something we're not. It just comes out naturally. So it feels, though these songs feel kind of hokey at times, or they feel very bluegrass at times, to us it feels very timeless because of just the enrichment of all of those variables. And so to me, it's not really trying to make records for a certain time. Like we tend to make records these days based on what's trending, or like, oh, Mumford and Sons came out 5 years ago, so let's try to kind of have foot stomping in our records and stuff, or and now it's been this 80s synth in the records, and all of that's well and good, and I appreciate it as much as the next guy. But what I love about these albums we've been doing lately is we're not really chasing the trends as much as just chasing what feels authentic.
Yeah.
And that I can't really put a label on it. I can't even say that this record is going to be embraced in a trending sense, but it just feels very authentic to who we are, And so I kind of gave up on walking the path of, how much is this going to be perceived as cool or not, or how much is this going to grow my fan base. In fact, this is very much a niche record, But I think when you're walking in your God-given abilities, that's why I think some of the breakout, you always hear about these breakout artists like Amy Winehouse and these really young musicians that sound like they're 50 or 60 years old, but they're only in their 20s. It's like, because they're in their teens tapping into something that's very authentic and is very tried and true about American culture and things that are kind of in our DNA and our blood. We don't even realize it almost sometimes till we get in our mid-30s and we start realizing, I don't even like the music that's on the radio. I actually like this artist over here because he really inspires. It's like the older we get, the more we're not really as impressed by some of that stuff. We just want to hear things that are real and honest. And, that's why you'll have older folks that'll take their lawn chairs and go set up at an acoustic festival. They're not really there to fawn over the artist. They're there to just hear authentic music,
Yeah. No, those are some fun festivals too. And I was thinking as I'm listening to the music, because you mentioned the smile on your face when you play that music, and because you guys are doing something that feels very authentic to you and that you're finding a lot of joy in, even if it's not the people who are listening in the audience, if it's not normally their preferred style of music, they automatically start enjoying it too, I have noticed. People who are heavy rockers normally, I've seen them at your concerts being like, yeah, this is terrific, and it is, you guys have found something very authentic and real, and that always sounds better than trying to sound like something else. But I also had this thought this morning, because you and I were talking just briefly beforehand about Going, Gone, for instance. And it was your grandfather's song, whose theology was a little bit different than yours. You kind of jokingly said N.T. Wright would probably not smile at some of the eschatology.
He would frown on it.
He would frown a little bit. But at the same time, you take this next to another song, like what I believe is the opening track on the album, Jacob's Ladder.
1, 2. We're going up and down Jacob's ladder, going up and down with the Lord, filled with the glory of our Savior, filled with the glory of the Lord. Jacob had a dream, there was a stairway to the heavens. Drank communion with the angels in the presence of the Lord. He descended back to earth with what he saw and what he heard in the power of the resurrected one. Going up and down Jacob's ladder, going up and down with the Lord, filled with the glory of our Savior, filled with the glory of the Lord.
I almost feel like you guys are chronicling in music almost a history of Christian music. And I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but as I was thinking through, I thought this is almost it's a modern take on a very classic sound that a lot of people would probably just hear in churches, whether it ever got recorded or not. You know, a lot of churches, especially if you'll go to smaller country churches, they weren't always like piano organ driven churches. A lot of times it was just a guy with a guitar, you know, that could get up and play songs on Sunday morning. So in some ways, projects like this, I almost feel like you're chronicling a history of music that is lost in some ways that people just aren't making anymore. What are your thoughts kind of about that?
I mean, I think that that's true. I think in a lot of artists in general that we look at and we think are doing something really, you know, not just in Christian music, but in music in general. You know, like I think of a guy like Jack White, who like when he came out in early 2000s, he sounded like an old blues musician.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's a style of music that's been done decade after decade after decade in bar rooms and in church, you know, even in some churches. But he does it in a way that's authentic to him. So he's taking a method, but putting his spin on it, you know? And when I think of church music in particular, gospel music, I think gospel music will always be a thing that will find its way into the marketplace and trend heavily more times than others. But I think if you can take a mode like that that's kind of been tried and true down, you know, through, you know, 75, 80 years of the church, that even now when any of us pull those songs out in our sets at churches, there's the lightheartedness or a different type of nostalgia or a different type of openness to the music. And I even think that, like, as much as we jokingly say too, that, you know, we don't really connect with young people as much. Like, we have a lot of fans in their 40s and 50s and 60s. At concerts, you will see a lot of younger kids that will stop and listen because they hear an authenticness to it. So I think in whatever we're doing, like even as pastors preaching the Word of God, sometimes if you can take the guise of it off where you're just kind of preaching to a room with passion and you can proceed with more of an honesty to like you're doing a mode of something that's been done for thousands and thousands of years, you know. But if your take on it can come across as more authentic than just, you know, being boisterous and passionate and really good at bringing it down, other than just, if you can just seem passionate but also seem very authentic, I think that's the thing, is what I'm trying to say. But I think when you talk about this record, you know, I can totally hear that, because it's not like we're reinventing the wheel with any of this stuff. We're kind of just, but we're putting our own spin on it, obviously with the harmonies and what Jeremy's playing and kind of what we do a little different, our own spin on it. But, and obviously the songwriting, we're not covering a lot of those old gospel songs. We're kind of writing new versions of some of those tunes. But yeah, I think I agree with you in that, you know, and I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of musical styles, you know, how some of the musical styles over the last 20 years keep up in, you know, 20 or 30 more years. Like if we can keep coming back to those places, those musical styles, and kind of putting our spin on it. And I do think it's possible, because I think you've already seen a resurgence in the 80s music. You're seeing a resurgence in bands that come out that kind of have a grunge, garage rock feel again. I don't know if it'll ever quite hit the same thing that like what gospel did or hymns did. But at the time when we did it, man, there was a lot of hymn covering, but I was like, where's gospel music again in the church? You know, like other than straight up Southern gospel, like who's taking that mode? Because we don't play a lot of Southern gospel events, though it could go over well in some of those places. Our appearance is the thing that probably will keep us out of those places, you know, more than the way we sound. You know, if we could just get people to close their eyes, Rick, you know, just don't look at us. Just close your eyes. You'll like it, I promise. So, yeah, I can see what you're saying about chronicling it a little bit from, you know, years past, you know. But I think you see it too, and even with songwriters, you know, like Rich Mullins and how he's inspired you, and a lot of other writers, you know, like you're seeing, and that poor guy never, he was, for everything I gather about him, and you know, I've had a lot of conversations with Mitch McVicker recently. I mean, he was kind of misunderstood in his time, you know, and it's almost like in the last 20 years, he's kind of gotten this real understanding. And so it's almost like the real music makers like yourself, and I'm not saying that other people aren't real music makers, but I'm saying people like you and me that are doing it, and we're doing it for the passion and the love of it, and we're driven by making music that's authentic and is creative, and we're not so much chasing the marketplace. Maybe our attention or the eyes on our music might happen 10 or 15 years from now when, you know, and that might not sound super exciting now, you know, but I think enough people will recognize what we're doing now to kind of keep it afloat. But I'm just saying that you're going to look at a guy like Rich Mullins and say, like, yeah, he had a good career back then, but in some ways his music is having more of an impact now because it's like seeped into a lot more. And I think people are starting to kind of understand him more now and really kind of get what he was trying to do, you know what I mean, at the time. So
yeah, that's true. Although, you know, I would beg to differ. I think all of you and Brothers McClurg, you are just sort of Adonises among men, and I think people should look at you as well and just admire you.
Is that another word? Is that another word for dinosaurs?
No, you're just you know, beautiful specimen of mankind. You know, you need to look at us too. That's all I was saying. You're not bad looking guys. That's all I'm saying. I jest, but I totally get what you say, and I appreciate those words. And you're right. I've always appreciated though just the way that you guys have been able to make it your own thing, whatever you do. And I think especially in and you know, you and I have talked before too. I think it was the first album that you guys did with Integrity Music, and it was a good album. But you, I believe, even said yourself, it didn't quite feel like us because it was a little bit like they were trying to force us into a bit of a mold that would go with like modern worship music.
Right.
And when they released you to kind of do your own thing on the next album and let you guys do it your way, it just had such a freeing feel, and I think you can hear it like in the music that's made then. And I feel like you guys have just gone above and beyond and over from that, and have just gotten better and better each time, each album that you release. When you play live, there is always something special that takes place with the audience. I've never seen you guys play when the audience just wasn't taken in after song one, you know, even if they've never heard you before. And that's a very special thing. I think it's a God-given, it's part of your gifting that God has given you guys, and you've been faithful to nurture the gift that you're good at, and made that part of your vocation. And I just always do. I always feel like there's something very special that God does in the room when you guys are playing together. And I don't know that anybody can quite put their finger on it. It's just you're being faithful to do it, and you're doing it well, and you're doing it, I think, the way God made you to do it. So.
Yeah, and I think the older I get, the more I kind of realize that, you know, like you hit a spot where you're like, well, I'm doing it kind of the way I want to do it, you know, and I don't have a lot of people trying to detour me from doing it that way.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of freedom in that, and you know, learning to accept yourself and what you're doing, you know, and there's a lot of freedom in being independent versus, you know, being signed to a label. And inevitably, it's not that labels are bad. It's just it comes with a fair amount more of pressure and opinions to do certain things, and not kind of abide by your own creative muse and what you're feeling led to do in the moment or in the season. Like I really love the record we made together. I mean, with the Thunder single and some of the treatments that we did throughout the tracks, and just I think when you hear it, you can tell that we had a lot of fun making it, and that we were going after just like capturing that and capturing you and what you're doing, and not stepping on the lyrics, because there's a lot of really great lyrics in some of those songs, and, you know, just trying to, you know, bridge all of those things together of your previous work into new work. And that's why we love production, and the Lord has really opened that door for us. I mean, we weren't doing that in the Integrity days at all, you know. It's like, so God's kind of opened up this whole other thing for us to like be a part of friends of ours' lives, to make music together. And it's always like this bittersweet thing when I'm like driving home the last day from a session, and I'm just kind of, you know, because I have a long commute. You remember, I live like an hour from the studio, and just kind of thinking like, oh man, it's kind of bittersweet, you know, like we just, you know, because it goes so fast. You're in the studio and you're making this record, and there's all these ideas flying around, and everybody's just trying to eat and trying to like stay alive for 6 or 7 days, you know, and you know, stay with it, you know. And then and it's always crazy to me how it can come together, because we don't really, it's not like we ever go in with you. We didn't even go in with this mentality of like, okay, we're going to have the drums like this for this song, and we're going to do that for this other song. Like we kind of went in a little bit of a blank slate with it. Like we obviously knew we wanted a couple of songs like for you on the songs Be My All and Be My All, and the one about your wife's miscarriage.
The Lord is our shepherd.
Yeah, that were very like touching. We kind of knew we wanted those to be stripped back, you know, but like the rest of it, we kind of approached open-handed. And I think there's a freedom in that too, of like those experiences don't have to feel methodical as much as like you can meet the Lord in creativity, and the spirit of the music, which we believe is the Holy Spirit, can lead you into a place of making something special, you know. I mean, my only thing, like, this is off the record, but we're on the record. I'm just going to say, like, if we ever do a record again, like, I would just love to have like more time to just like plan another like 3 or 4 days where we can just create and not like rush ourselves. You know, like really like and I love everything that we did on that record. I'm not saying anything I'm just saying that like if I was to follow it up again and try to like outdo what we did on that record, what would I do different? It would just be like, let's just have more time to really sit in it and sit in the songs and the arrangements. And I don't know.
No, and I you know what, I'll tell you what you did. I didn't mean to turn the conversation about me, but it was fun it was fun to get to record those songs with you, and something very interesting happened that I didn't expect to happen. You know, on past albums, I've been content to play a little bit, or you know, the one I did with Lifeway, I barely played at all on that album. I did some, you know, electric lead stuff every now and then, but mostly it was them. And you really pushed me to like, you know, have fun and play all the instruments. And something I did on that album that I'd never done before very much at all was play piano. And it ended up those tracks that have, some of them are just me and a piano playing, like The Lord is Our Shepherd. Like that music video on YouTube has over 10,000 views now, and it's the one that people are like requesting a lot in concert. And this weird shift has happened when I play live now. I'm starting to become known as a piano singer-songwriter instead of a guitar singer-songwriter because
right.
It's weird. I've never had that before because I've always been known for like playing guitar and stuff, and I don't think people even knew I played piano until this album. So now it's even working with like management and stuff. They're putting out pictures that are piano based. So it's been interesting because you I think helped to kind of unlock a new I don't know if image is the quite the right word, but people do associate a certain way of thinking about you with the instrument you play, and so there's kind of become a different feel when I tour and when I play my own music. But I think you do that with a lot of artists. You guys have figured out your sound and where you're going. You work with whether it be with somebody like Ian Zumbach, you've really helped him capture who he is. And just a few weeks ago I got to hang out for a few days with Weston Skaggs and for listeners.
Cool.
And we hung out at the Sing conference in Nashville, and you guys really have done the same thing with him, and I just feel like you're continuing to grow as a producer, and the productions that you're coming out with, they're very unique and very stylized, and I don't think we're hearing anything quite like them coming out from any other record labels. So I really appreciate what you're doing. So.
Well, when I came into the studio the one day, I think you were playing "Stay," the song "Stay" on the record, and if you edit any of this out in the interview, I'm going to be very offended. Just so you know.
I hardly ever edit anything.
Okay, because I know we're talking about your record, but you know what? That's a big part of our story. A big part of what Brothers does is what you do, because we took the journey with you. We were at your CD release. We made something. We put it out into the world, and I'm proud of it, and I want to talk about it too. And I don't think I ever came onto this with you. I didn't come onto a podcast with you after your record came out, so I never got to share any of my memories of those sessions. But yeah, I mean, I came in the one day before we started, and you were playing "Stay" on the piano, and that song has it has a really cool feel. The chords are really, really interesting. It almost has this like jazz. It's like jazz chording, but it comes out of like a folk place. So it's like, it reminds me a little bit of like a Van Morrison record, where it's like he's kind of more of a folk rock guy, but they threw this kind of like pizzazz, like chording in there, and it seems to like unlock those combinations and unlock something that's kind of unique. And the same thing with that song. And so I heard you playing on piano. I was like, it never really struck me that you played outside of like the demos, and then you started playing the other songs, and it was like, this is kind of another facet of what you do, and in a different way for people to kind of hear you than just with an acoustic guitar, because it just brings out a different type of intimacy. When we were at the CD release and you were playing those songs on the piano, it just draws people in a totally different way than with Thunder or, some of the more upbeat songs on the record, which I like those too because they're fun to drive to. But yeah, I think the ones that really stick with you are the ones where you feel like there's the least amount of pretense or the least amount of any of that stuff. And it just it's pretty raw and it's pretty real. And we try to do that with some of the elements, Be My All, with like the Potter's Wheel, and just kind of bringing in some of the sights and the sounds of that stuff too. Cause I'm big on those things, just like how we, virtual reality is becoming a big thing right now, experiencing things, or, you hear something and it brings to mind other things. And besides just the song itself. So trying to pull in these other elements as much as we can. But I mean, all of those things are apparent in those songs, and so it doesn't surprise me that you say that to me. In fact, it may be cool to do something you should think about doing, is doing a follow-up, or maybe you even do some new songs, but then take some songs from your other records, like Before Thunder, and do versions like that, where, yeah, you still have a few songs, you have bass and drums, like we had, you know, Paulie and Steve and Jeremy playing upright, and a little bit of tremmy electric guitar on some stuff, like, but it's all kind of rooted in, hey, because the thing I would say about a lot of your stuff is, like, the lyrics are really solid, and you can kind of easily forget that because there's other stuff going on. So how do you, like, enjoy the story, or where the lyric is trying to take you? And I think that's something that you've really honed in on, that sometimes with other folks I work with, they don't bring that to the table, and then we have to try to force that out, because it's like, you know, if the songwriting isn't there, it makes, you know, it's like just an album of really cool sounds without, you know, the song. So it's kind of a shell. So I mean, I think you have that, and I would encourage you to like do something like that, because I think that would help people even enjoy some of your past songs in a way that maybe they hadn't before, you know, like, or even like, man, I never really heard that song that way, or it never really hit me the way it's hitting me now because of the production. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that. It just occurs to me that those who are listening, this is a lot how we talk before we're getting ready to make a record together.
Yeah,
This is kind of fun. This is behind the scenes baseball, as they say, or however it is.
All right. Yeah.
This is great. No, well, I appreciate your kind words, and I appreciate just how much you guys have invested in me too as an artist, and it's always been a lot. I do. You know what? I'm going to surprise everybody at the end of our conversation, and I'm going to surprise you with an announcement that has to do with Thunder. But I don't want to do that just yet, because I want to get back one more time about your new album, Around the Mic too, because we really want to promote that a lot while we're here, and we're running low on time. But tell me real quick. Is there a special moment on the album for you? And we've already talked about your grandfather, and we've talked about Jacob's Ladder, and the listeners today are going to get to hear some of these. But is there a moment on the album, apart from those, that really just became a very special moment musically or spiritually for you? It just really stands out, that is always going to have a special place in your heart on this release?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think personally think the song that really marks where we're at right now is track 3 of the project, which is Old Time Religion.
1, 2, 3. There is a place I long to go to satisfy my soul, a place where I can rest my weary head, where I can lay down my work and toil no longer in the sun, and be at peace when the day is done. There is a place I long to find, like my grandfather's home. I can still hear his old radio, playing songs of revival and a hope in Jesus Christ. And we sit and watch the rows of corn grow. Give me that old time religion, give me that old time faith, that old church choir singing out Amazing Grace. Give me that name of Jesus above every other name. Give me that hope, give me that love, and give me that faith. There is a place I long to go that I can call my home, a place where I can lay my burden down, where your goodness shines upon me like the brightness of the sun, and I can finally breathe the air you're riding on. Give me that old-time religion, give me that old-time faith, that old church choir singing out Amazing Grace. Give me that name of Jesus above every other name. Give me that hope, give me that love, and give me that faith.
It's good enough for me. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. It's good enough for me. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. It's good enough for me. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Give me that old-time religion, give me that old-time faith, that old church choir singing out Amazing Grace. Give me that name of Jesus above every other name. Give me that hope, give me that love, give me that hope, give me that love, give me that hope, give me that love, and give me that faith.
I don't know what it is about that song, but it's and that one in particular was like a straight collaboration between all three of us. Like my brother had the verses, Jeremy wrote the chorus, and I had like a bridge idea of like, we need to further this, you're already singing Old Time Religion in the chorus. We need to further that old chorus with like, it's good enough for me, taste and see, the Lord is good. Let's further that idea. So it was kind of like the only song on the record that's probably like a straight three-way collaboration. Like it wouldn't sound that way if it wasn't all of us kind of adding to the conversation. Now all the other songs were like more heavy-handed by one of us, and then the others kind of offset it with a verse or something. But that one was like kind of a real straight collaboration. And that one just kind of makes me smile the most because it does, my brother talks about my grandfather a lot. And, I can remember being a kid in the summers outside with his garage open because he fixed cars too, and always had like these old Christian revival time radio stations on, like the Jimmy Swaggarts and the even before, was it some of the other guys that, Jim Baker, I know he's had a different public life the last 20 years. I'm talking, 30, 40 years ago. Obviously the very old stuff of Bill Gaither but anyways, so all of those images kind of come into mind when you hear some of the lyrics in that song. Mm-hmm. And the chorus is really strong. Like people keep saying, man, it should be like a country artist needs to cover that song because it's like it's catchy and it's just but it also brings in this like this homegrown feeling of like, I think what a lot of people who've even walked away from God and faith can still receive it because it reminds them of the times they were in the church or around religion in a good way, like before, stuff hit the fan or somebody offended them or they just decided they didn't believe in Jesus anymore. So it's like, I see that song kind of drawing on, tugging on people's heart a little bit, that maybe aren't in the faith anymore, but grew up in the faith when they were kids, and they can remember being at church and kind of experiencing some of those things. And that, to me, when I think of the church, it's like, you know, yeah, I have my doubts like everybody else does, you know, like, and there's stuff that people bring up all the time that I'm like, yeah, there's a lot about the church that I don't agree with. And even doctrinally, I'm not necessarily on the same page of it. But, like, even if, like, science proved that God didn't exist, it wouldn't change how I feel about it, because it's so innately in my soul, because it was modeled for me. I saw it in the faces of my parents, my grandparents. It's so ingrained in steeped into my system that I just feel it when I see it, or when when I'm around it, that it's like, it genuinely feels like faith. It doesn't mean that I'm always in the best place spiritually, or that I always feel like worshiping, or, you know, I'm not very consistent in my Bible reading. But that thing never leaves me. And that's like what I think the Bible talks about when it says, you know, that, you know, you're a child of God. You know, those born of the Spirit are blown by the hand of God. And you can kind of see it throughout your life. And I even think there's a lot of people that are not following the faith right now that still have that in them. And they just need to be reminded that, like, you know, you may have walked away from this, but he hasn't walked out on you, and he's still following you and going before you. All you got to do is just receive it. Like, you don't worry about all the other stuff, you know. And so when you say a term like old-time religion, you say that now, and, you know, we would shoot 1,000 holes in that, because religion, well, we don't believe in religion, we believe in relationship. But what that says to me is the things about the church, the community of the church, the helping your brother out in need. There's things about the early church that I remember, of, like, not the early church in history, but the early church of my life, of 70s and 80s, of just, you know, the giving side of the church, the where Jesus gave a cup of cold water, and just going back to those old elementary things, those religious things, I think just are still really effective, and still really are it's always the simple things, man. It's never like, it's never debating with somebody about why you think God is real or not real, right? It's got to be something that hits your gut, you know? And so that song just does that for me. So sorry for the rant again.
No, that's terrific. I love, you know, VH1's Behind the Music show was always my favorite show. And I feel like what we're getting here is a little bit of the behind the music on these songs, and I appreciate it so much. So, no, this is good content, all of it, and I'm so glad that you shared it with us today. But I'm going to be running out of time, and you've been so great. We've talked almost 40 minutes today, so that's pretty awesome. Do you want to be with me here for this special announcement that has to do with Thunder, since you produced the album and put so much into it?
Oh, yes, I do.
Okay. Well, there was a pause. I wasn't sure. I was getting a little scared. So,
no,
well, this is something that officially is not going to be announced until we do the press release in October. So this is sort of a Voices in My Head exclusive, and you don't know about it yet either. So I'm going to share it with you, and I'm excited to do that. And it just feels like a good time to do it, because we were talking about the album that you produced for me, Thunder. In October, we have a very special half-hour radio show around the album Thunder that's going to be distributed and marketed to 2,000 Christian radio stations throughout the U.S. and a few international things, and we've been working really hard on it, and it's very much going to be in like a documentary style format. So
I love that.
There'll be different clips and kind of telling behind the scenes and about the songs, and the announcer. I mean, it's a for real radio special, and I'm so excited about it. It's going to be a full half hour featuring 5 songs from the album plus behind the scenes stuff. And you know, it's kind of a financial risk, but it's one I'm hoping that's going to be able to pay off and get it into a lot more ears. And it's also, from what I understand, going to be promoted to the Worship Leader magazine audience as well through some email blasts and stuff. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm proud to share about that with you today.
So that's on like like some global stations, radio stations that are,
Yeah. So
Are
it'll
you going to
be.
have a premiere of it? Like,
Yeah, what's going to happen
yeah.
is it'll be pushed and marketed through West Star Media, and so they have the option. I don't know if you remember, but last year we promoted Advent Hymn very heavily around the holiday season. The
Mhm.
song that I wrote, and it got played on, I don't know, it was close to like 900 outlets, something like that. So it had a lot of
Great.
play at Christmas time. But it's always the choice of the radio station, so this will be working through West Star Media to distribute it to over 2,000 radio stations, and so they basically have the option, yes, we'll play that as a show, and or no, we won't. But even if they say no, we won't, we're still going to make it available through my YouTube page and my website, so people can actually go online and share a link and hear the show and share it with other people and listen. And hopefully it'll be a way for people to kind of not just hear the album, but be able to get behind the scenes and hear some stories about it, and really kind of dive in that much deeper into the album. And so I'm really proud about it, and
Yeah,
you're a
I
big
love
part of
that,
it.
man.
So,
I definitely
yeah.
like. You should do like some sort of Facebook like premiere event, you know, because
Yeah.
we would definitely share that too, because I'm a big believer in the story of a record, and I think there's a lot of story to that record, and so I would love like our fans and Old Bear and all of those people to like hear what you're going to say about it, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm excited. That's a great idea, and so we can keep talking about it later. But for right now, I want everybody to go out and buy a copy of Around the Mic 2. I was so glad to get to pre-order it and be able to listen to it. And it's a really special album, and I know all of your fans are going to enjoy it. So everybody listening to Voices in My Head today, do me a favor. Share a link about Brothers McClurg's new album, Around the Mic 2. Whether you use Twitter or Facebook or even email, you can send an email to a family member or a friend, say, hey, there's this album that I really dig, and you're going to like it just from the music you've heard on the show today. So Chris Hoisington, thank you for being one of the voices in my head this week.
I love it. Thank you, man.
1, 2, 3, 1. If it's peace that you need, if it's shelter you seek, come to the altar and pray. For the soul may be willing, but the body is weak. Come to the altar and pray. It gets tough on the road when you're traveling alone, and you just can't keep your hand to the wheel. Just know there's peace if you need it, shelter if you seek it. Come to the altar and pray. If it's comfort you need or compassion you seek, come to the altar and pray. If you're out on your own with nowhere to go, come to the altar and pray. It gets tough on the road when you're traveling alone, and you just can't keep your hand to the wheel. Just know there's peace if you need it, shelter if you seek it. Come to the altar and pray. He said, come It's tough on the road when you're traveling alone, and you just can't keep your hand to the wheel. Just know there's peace if you need it, shelter if you seek it. Come to the altar and pray.
Thank you for joining me here this week on Voices in My Head. I hope you'll visit me on my website at rickleejames.com, where you can find out more about me, get my music on vinyl and CD, follow my blog, and even schedule me for a concert or a speaking engagement. Better yet, even a book signing in your neighborhood. You can find all that and more at rickleejames.com. Also, it would mean a great deal to me if you could write a review of this podcast on iTunes. The more positive reviews that we receive, the more visible this podcast will be online. And now for the benediction. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope. God bless you, and thank you for listening to Voices in My Head.